Okay, so we're going to be talking about the science section today, and we're going to go over some strategies from the first test in the ACT curriculum book. So the first thing you need to mention with science tests when you're talking to a student is that the science test is one of the most frustrating sections of all, right? You're taking a whole test, it's at the very end, you're exhausted, and you look at the test and you have no clue what's going on. So the most important thing is that you need to, hold on, let me get rid of this stuff. There you go. The most important thing is that you're focused. So I always tell the students it's 35 minutes, it's quick. Mentally, get yourself ready. First strategy, it's a mind game, get yourself where you need to go. Second strategy, ask the students if they read the passages. Some will tell you yes, some will tell you no. And ask those who said yes, to them reading the passage, did they actually learn anything? Did they remember anything? Did it help them with any of the questions? And what you'll find is that majority of the students will say, no, it didn't really help me to read much. So the second strategy is do not read the passages. Reading the passages is not helpful. You just want to go right to the questions. Okay, do not read the passages. Reading about the finch beak depths of all the G Fortis and it's not helpful. I'm not going to remember. I'm not going to retain anything. What is helpful is to be able to identify question types and know the strategies for each question type. So what we're going to do today is we'll talk about 2 to 3 question types, what I like to teach in my first lesson, and how to go about them. So we'll work on this first passage here. So looking at the questions, the first type of question, which is my favorite question, is a data question. Now, a data question is just a straightforward, get information from a table or from a graph and answer it. So let's look at number 1. Okay, based on the results of study 1, the highest percentage of finches on islands B and island C had a beak depth of. This is straightforward pulling data from the question. Now I tell the students you need to repeat certain things in your mind when you go back. So what are we repeating? We're repeating study 1 and highest percent of finches on island B and island C. So I'm telling myself, okay, study 1, highest percent of finches and island B and island C. So now where do I look? I'm looking at study 1. I'm looking at island B over here and island C. The highest percent of finches on island B, right? You can see over here. And you can see over here, right? So what are their beak depths? Both of their beak depths are 10. And you go back and you see it's answer choice D, 10 and 10. Okay? And by remembering that information, it helps kind of direct you when looking back at the passage. Right? It gives you a purpose, it gives you a focus, it gives you a goal, and it makes everything just much more, driven. Now, favorite type of question would be something like this. And if you look at the science, you can see data questions. Questions 1, 16, 36, and 37 from this test are all data questions. Great. Okay. My next favorite type of question is probably a estimation question. Okay. So that's going to be something like number 8. Okay, now an estimation question is just like a data question in the sense that you're looking at the chart, except with an estimation question, the question that you're trying to answer, the data that you're trying to look for is not on the table. So you need to estimate, where that point would be. So let's look at something like number 8. Based on the results of study 1, the average monthly wet deposition for Cu2 plus over the 12-month period was. Again, repeat the information in your mind. So we're looking at study 1 and we're looking at wet deposition for Cu2 plus. Okay, so I'm going to study 1. I'm going to study 1. Here's study 1. And now I'm looking at wet deposition, monthly wet deposition. I see that over here for Cu2 plus. Great, I'm looking over here. And they want to know the average monthly. So the average. So if I were to kind of average this out, right, where do I see this averaging out to? I see it averaging out between somewhere over here, right? So if I were to look at my answer choices, it's a little bit less than 100, I would say, between 50 and 100. If I look at my answer choices, I have to decide, is it between 50 and 75, or is it between 75 and 100? I look back again, and clearly it's between 50 and 75, right? Most of them are kind of around 50. A few are a little higher. It's going to be between 50 and 75. So this is, a data question, but kind of one level a little bit stronger. And you can see there were a bunch of questions on the test like this. So you can do those questions. There were 10 data questions on the test and 6 estimation questions on the test. So 16 of the questions were data and estimation. You literally don't need to know anything from the passage. You just need to know how to look back. And my final question that I like to do in the first lesson, so I do data questions, I do estimation questions, and I like to do yes-no questions. So let's do a yes-no question. So if you look in every passage, something like number 6, you see how the answer choices say yes, and then they say no. And if you look in passage 2, you'll see another yes, no, number 9, right? And if you look in passage 3, you'll see another yes, no, number 15. So basically in every passage, you have a yes-no question. Now, what's the strategy with the yes-no question? So we'll start on question 6 here. Okay, if you look at the answer choices, right, what do you see? You see that in question 6, 2 of them say yes, 2 of them say no. Let's read the explanations. The range of beak depths measured for G-force was greater on island A than on island B. If you look in the next one, was greater on island B than island A, greater than island A than B, and greater on island B than A. So basically 2 of these answer explanations are identical, okay? In F and H, the only difference in the answer choices is the word yes and the word no. So the first step to doing a yes-no question is I don't even read the question. The question is confusing, it's not directed, it doesn't tell me where to look. What do? I read the explanations. So is it true that the range of the beak depth was greater on island A, or was it greater on island B? So I look at the range of the beak depth. So where do I see beak depths? Where do I see A and B? Here's beak depths. Here's island A and island B, and we're talking about G-force. So where is there a greater range? There's a greater range on island A. So I know that automatically, I know that F and H are possible options, and G and J are automatically wrong. So now it's a 50-50. And at this point, I'm feeling confident enough to read the question. So let's actually read the question. A researcher hypothesized that there would be more variations in the beak depths measured for the G-fortis when they were forced to compete with other fish species. Do the results from study 1 support this hypothesis? So they're saying there's going to be more variation when they're forced to compete. Now, looking back here, which situation looks like they're being forced to compete? Right? Clearly, it's in study A because I see another bird. I see G. fulginosa. Okay, I see these 2 competing. And was it true that when they were competing, there was a greater range? Yes, it was. A had a greater range. And therefore, the answer to this is yes. Okay, and we know that the explanation is because the range measured on greater A were greater than island B. So, what was the purpose of using this strategy? The purpose was I now have direction for the question. I know where to look, and I'm able to eliminate 2 of the answer choices without even understanding. So, to recap, the goal of your first lesson should be 1, it's a mind game. 2, don't read the passages. 3, data questions. 4, estimation questions. 5, yes-no questions. Okay? I just do all the questions of that type. If you have a few extra minutes, I would recommend mentioning that there's one passage, okay, that's different than all the others. You can see here it's passage 5. The reason why it's different is because there's no charts or tables, and this is the only question where I'll actually read. Okay? That's the last thing I might mention if I'm feeling up to it and if I have the time. Good luck and enjoy.